All right, good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for coming tonight. My name is Jasper Dent, and I'm the event coordinator here at McNally Robinson Booksellers in Saskatoon, which I say because there is another one in Winnipeg. I only do the Saskatoon events. I'd like to start off by acknowledging that this event is being held on Treaty 6 territory. This is the land of the Cree, Dene, Saulteaux, Dakota, Nakota, and Lakota, and homeland of the Métis. It's my pleasure to welcome you this evening to our celebration of the release of the aptly named debut by Spud Publishing. This isn't exactly a launch because the book has actually been out for a while, but it is a chance for us to support this wonderful collection of stories and art, as well as learn a bit more about the folks involved in creating it. I'd like to thank Spud Publishing and especially Chenise Puchailo for initially reaching out to us here at McNally and working to make this event a possibility. Thank you. Before we get started, I'd just like to note that this event is being live streamed, so please just be aware of the web camera up to the front and your right up here. And I'd also like to take this time to remind you all to silence your cell phones. There's always someone who forgets. Including
as I double check.
And sometimes awkwardly the host, so this is to remind myself too. All right, now I'm going to hand things over to Chenise. Everyone please give her a very warm welcome.
First off, I just want to say I am so excited to see so many full seats. Not gonna lie, when I was sitting down and looking out at all of you, I got a little emotional. I might still tear up. I am one of the owners of Spud Publishing. My business partner is Jenny Kong, who unfortunately could not make it. She's from Vancouver. I would love to say that Spud Publishing is just an endeavor between the two of us, but it certainly is not. It is also all of the people you see behind me, as well as a few other Vancouverites. None of what we are about to present to you today would happen without any of these amazing people, their patience with us as we decided to go legitimate, become federally incorporated, become a proper publisher. So I would like to extend a huge thank you to all of you for coming and supporting, for those of you who've already bought, for those of you online, and for those of you who intend to purchase. As a project, this has exceeded all of our expectations. It has been phenomenal for something we did that was supposed to be a one-time thing for funsies. And absolutely hugest thanks to all of these wonderful authors and artists who made this possible, who tolerated all of our missteps as we learned what it took to become a publishing company, and who stayed on the whole journey with us, even when we moved the goalposts and decided this wasn't going to be a one-time thing, we were going to become legitimate. That being said, I would love to extend a round of applause to these wonderful people here, to our contributors that couldn't make it, and to all of you for bringing us to this point in our journey. So please, by all means, thank you. Without further ado, I didn't realize you're on the clock. I would like to call up Rachel Sikorsky to read from her works, Silver Consequences. Thank you.
The sun was setting when Oberon woke to a skittering sound from outside his bedroom. He stood from the bed, cautiously pushed past the interior linen curtain, and followed the sound down the temple hallway until he was in the nave. When he was startled when a small rodent with a deep blue and bright yellow coat scurried past him, heading toward the temple entrance. He made to follow the strange-colored creature when he heard Sorrel's voice from just outside. "Get out of here, Harlequin." Her voice was biting, with an edge he'd never experienced from her before. The name lit up a memory from her grumbling about one of the leaders of the Calais, an eccentric being who meddled everywhere they went, all while draped in garish patchwork of clashing textiles. The sound of dozens of voices, all different pitches and inflections, responded. "That is no way to speak to us. We are just wondering what you think you will get from coming back here." Oberon snuck toward the entrance. He didn't dare go outside, but peering through the gap between the curtain and the floor, he could make out shadows of two people on the other side. "I do not need commentary from you," she snapped. "Thone is enraged by your disobedience. Very curious, then, that he would approach us to pass a message along, a warning, if you will." How does he know I disobeyed him? Sorrel's voice had lost some of its luster. He knows many things, and knowledge is a powerful tool when leveraged correctly. There was a chuckle that made the hairs on Oberon's arms stand up as a chill rolled through him. But it is as if we know things of all times and places. Thone knows less than he wants to be made known. She made an annoyed noise in the back of her throat that Oberon had heard many times just before she lost all patience. So then what message did he want passed along? A rustle of fabric accompanied by clicks of tongues sounded. Ah, yes. Thone sacrificed his progeny to seal the Ubixa. You think he cares about a village of mortals? Odd how often that works, how history repeats, how history breaks. Sorrel gave a dark chuckle. You cryptic asshole. Are you trying to tell me that all of the people are going to die here? That is not what we are saying. Just as Thone did not commit the crime, inaction still belies a weak heart. You need to listen better. A pause set Oberon on edge. You could take pointers from that mortal you seem so attached to. He seems to know how to listen. Oberon cursed under his breath as the shadows lifted and Sorrel pulled the curtain back. Suddenly, they were face to face as she loomed in the doorframe. He tried to peer behind her to whomever she'd been speaking to, but couldn't see over her shoulder. The voices laughed before speaking a final sentence. Coincidences and consequences, our duty-bound Sorrel. What are you doing? She snapped, backing Oberon into the temple. He caught a glimpse of a figure wrapped head to toe in draping blue and yellow cloth, just as she let the curtain fall close behind her. He ignored her question for a few of his own. Is it true about us dying? And who was that? Sorrel shook her head. The Harlequin is notorious among Calais for constantly stirring up trouble the way wind stirs up dust. That is to say, never-ending and without regard for propriety. Very rarely do they say anything worth listening to. She moved farther into the room and frowned at him. Why were you listening to my conversation? Why were you having a conversation right outside the temple door? Her face flushed blue. I was on my way to see you. They snuck up on me. He opened his mouth to respond when Richter's voice from outside interrupted him, calling his name. They turned to see the priest of knowledge appear in the entranceway. He was out of breath. His leather cuirass, an ill-fitting and little-used piece of equipment, had been haphazardly thrown over his head, the buckles still loose. What's going on? Oberon asked. I was charting the stars from the walls and ran into Eden outside of town. He sent me to get you. There's Nubixa heading this way from the dunes, according to Dakar. He figures we can cut it off long before it gets to the walls if we go now. Oberon nodded before turning around and racing to his room. He grabbed his leather armor and the sword his uncle had given him when he turned 15 and headed back. We should talk later, Sorrel said with a frown, her lips pursed. Oberon grunted in agreement as he threw his armor over his head and then went to Richter to help the other man with his buckles. Cuirasses secure, the two men left the temple at a run, Richter leading the way. Oberon looked beside him to see Sorrel running. Her gait so even, it looked as though she was gliding across the sandy ground. I thought you weren't supposed to get involved, he called to her. I am not going to sit by while you put yourself in danger. What about the consequences? He let out a huff as his legs started to burn. She responded, they are already in motion. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Rachel. So I'd also just like to mention, I guess I didn't quite properly introduce the anthology. It's a little nerve-wracking. So the anthology is an anthology of 5 short stories, all in sci-fi, fantasy, and speculative fiction. What we did a little differently in the process is we partnered each of our authors with a corresponding artist. So the book also has 10 completely original illustrations to accompany 5 never before published stories. So it was a cool experience in which all of the writers got to workshop with each other, and then all of the artists got to do pieces based off of the first draft of writing. And we were clear with the authors that they were more than welcome to have input if, say, some of the illustration didn't quite match what their how they saw their world. But as a whole, the as a whole, the authors did not have input on the illustrations. So the work is entirely original. It's entirely in the style of the artists. And it's something that we also want to continue doing, is supporting the expression of our writers and our artists. That being said, we do have Romy Poisson here, who is one of the artists. So unfortunately, you can't really read a piece of art, so she will not be coming up, but I also wanted to take a moment to acknowledge her. Without further ado, I would like to invite Amy Garayan up to read her story, A Very Nomi Birthday.
Thanks, Chenise. And it's just Nomi birthday, I guess.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I wouldn't have known either.
You wrote it and I published it and we still don't know.
As he popped the top on her energy drink as she walked out the door of her rented duplex, pausing to lock the door before bopping down the driveway. The street was silent, wrapped in the relative darkness of the very early morning. Old school AC/DC played in her earbuds as she danced towards the car sitting in the driveway. She took a sip from the bright pink can in her hand. Not bad for some random energy drink that Price Point, the warehouse store where she worked, had started carrying. It fit her price range too. Cheap. She set the drink on the roof of her ancient car and worked to unlock the door. The 1976 Camaro was older than her oldest brother Ben, and like Ben, it had its own handful of problems. The door needed 2 hands to unlock, one to turn the key and one to jiggle the handle just right, a little bit up and a little bit to the left. Maybe she should look at getting the handle fixed if she couldn't figure it out herself. It was her birthday today. She could spoil herself with a little car repair. She chuckled. Yep, she was going to spoil herself all right, but it was going to be with a breakfast burger on the way to work, not fixing idiosyncrasies on her car. Tip of her tongue sticking out the side of her mouth as he wiggled the handle until the door popped open. She reached up to grab her energy drink and started to slide in without glancing into the vehicle, which meant that the hard, pointy object she sat down on came as a surprise. Jumping back up as he looked down at her seat from safely outside the car. A garden gnome looked up at her from the driver's seat. What the heck? Where had this thing come from? As he cast her eyes around the yard, looking at her silent residential neighborhood. Whoever had left the gnome was hiding really well, or as he expected, long gone. Most people weren't insane enough to be up and leaving for work around 3 o'clock in the morning. Since she couldn't drive to work with a gnome sitting in the seat, as he reached down and plucked it up with one hand. It looked vaguely familiar, with its long white beard and pointy bright red hat. Shrugging, because those were common enough gnome features, and who was she to pass up something free, as he tossed her new passenger into the seat beside her, where it bounced before settling. As he slid into her seat, attempt number 2, successful. Switching her music from her headphones to her car, as he silently thanked the vehicle's previous owner for upgrading the sound system and headed towards the nearest Burger King for the promised birthday breakfast burger. That's why you look familiar! Alone on the freeway, as he shouted, pointing at the passenger seat with her burger in excitement. From that random photography class Ben had to take. I knew I would figure it out eventually, as he nodded her head in satisfaction, head bobbing along with the music. I'm a smart cookie. She glanced towards the gnome. Didn't Curtis name you Timmy? He didn't reply, as yard decorations are wont to do, lying on the seat where he had been tossed. As he nodded again, convinced that Curtis, her second oldest brother, had named the gnome. Yep, pretty sure Curtis figured you looked like a Timmy, and Ben hated you even more. Apparently, gnomes don't need names, or their pictures taken. She chuckled, remembering how sour Ben had been. You don't need to name the stupid thing. It's not alive, Ben had mumbled. It's just a stupid assignment. Ben had never really got art, or why he had to take a photography class to become more well-rounded. None of that mattered now, because all Azzy knew was that she was driving with a gnome named Timmy riding shotgun. She was also fairly sure that Ben had shoved his unloved model into the back of the shed. Their eclectic Uncle Steve, who had given Ben the gnome, hadn't wanted it back, but had left strict instructions for the family not to dispose of it. As he squinted at the road, Curtis must have pulled it out of the shed and left it in the car. He was the only one with a spare set of keys to her vehicle and enough knowledge of her schedule to know when she was sleeping. He also knew how to open the car door. This was what happened when he lived on the other side of the duplex. It was probably payback for the gnome-covered boxers she had given him at Christmas. Cackling as she crumpled her burger wrapper and tossed it in the back seat as he crowed, "Curtis! Expect to find this gnome on your bed tomorrow." She settled back against the seat, happy to finally have a reason to use those emergency spare keys he had given her. Returning a garden gnome was obviously an emergency. As he turned the music up as the freeway headed out of town, dancing in her seat, prairie landscape spreading out before her. So far, this birthday was awesome. Since it wasn't every day that a person turned 26, Azzy decided it was a sign. The rest of the day was going to be great. Pretty nice wheels you've got here. The voice came out of nowhere, and Azzy startled, swerving the car to the left, across the lane beside her, and into the far shoulder, before swinging back to the right in her surprise. Holy shit. She tried not to hyperventilate, focusing on the road. She had never been more grateful for the empty early morning roads. Back in her lane, Azzy slowed until the car was barely moving as she looked around the interior. Somebody in the backseat? Nope, clear. Or at least nothing in the rearview mirror. She twisted to get a better look. Who the heck was in her car? And why were they just speaking up now? Surely, if someone had stowed away, they would have said something at Burger King and demanded free food. As she had guessed, there was no one in the back seat. On the way back to the front windshield, Azzy's gaze caught on the gnome in her passenger seat. Or rather, the gnome that was now pulling himself onto the passenger seat from the sea of garbage on the floor. Holy freaking shit. This time, Azzy slammed on the brakes, sending the gnome back into the mess of old wrappers and empty bottles. This wasn't happening. What was in that burger? It couldn't have been laced with hallucinogens. No one gave away expensive drugs. Not in burgers. And especially when they knew they wouldn't be there to see the results. Better get off the road. The gnome was once again trying to regain his spot on the passenger seat, his stubby fingers searching for purchase on the fake leather. Azzy didn't want to imagine what her face looked like. She was sure that her eyes were popping out of her head. There was a freaking garden gnome talking to her in the middle of the night. A gnome that was supposed to be inanimate in a shed across town. The car, off the road. He sighed, finally getting up onto the seat. Why do I always get this reaction? Azzy snapped her mouth shut and stared out the windshield. Right. So much for an awesome birthday.
So Amy is also, she actually did double duty in the anthology. She was one of our writers and she was also one of our artists. So two of the illustrations in there also belong to yeah, a little bit of an overachiever over here. So two of the illustrations actually are hers. They were the ones linked to my story. And without further ado, I would like to call up Dawn Gatens to read from Harry Framling's
Desert Danger.
Desert Dangers, thank you.
That's a working title that got published. Danger! A scuffed and stinky standard issue size 14 desert combat boot pushed against my face and jiggled my head in cadence with my nickname. Danger! Barry, come on, Sergeant, wake up. Cahalia kept nudging my face while clinging to the rear crossbar of our Polaris Dagger ultralight combat vehicle. It's basically an armored ATV, a hell of fun to roam around in when you're not getting shot at. Sleep dodged way behind a sand dune, and I blinked myself awake, patting away the reeking boot. Dear God's flower, your foot smells worse than a skunk's ass. I hit his nickname with extra emphasis and pushed Cahalia's stinking boot away. We're having another chat about basic foot care when we get back to base. I rubbed the grit out of my eyes and looked up at the tanned, grinning hulk of a man with the soft pink Hawaiian hibiscus tattoo under his ear. I'd initially thought that his nickname came from the tattoo, but he'd woken me up with his stinking sock more than once, and I learned the horrible, horrible truth. We'd been working as a team under the Combined Special Operations Force for months. I enjoyed his bad puns and ability to stay positive in the worst circumstances, enough to forgive the occasional stinky prank. Sinead O'Leary, the petite sergeant in the driver's seat, kept her eyes forward and scanned the sandy hills of the expansive desert the whole time as she teased, "You boys and your nicknames. Framling, did you really think you could introduce yourself to me as Perilous?" And she ran my names together so they sounded like one word, Harry Lewis. And not get nicknamed Stranger Danger. Haley snorted, "I thought it was his pedo stash." Sinead snapped her fingers in appreciation and pointed blandly over her shoulder at the muscle-bound corporal. I winced at the double shots and picked my battle. I nudged the back of her seat with my knee. Cute little freckle-faced, shaved-headed science fiction fans have no business throwing shade, but I'll take it over what they were calling me before I shave that monstrosity. Do you feel left out that we've been stuck in this oven for 6 months and no one's roasted you with a spicy nickname yet? My head is shaved and my name is Sinead. You lot just aren't creative enough to move past the obvious. I leaned forward and teasingly stage whispered, "I've seen your social media feed, Sinead Marie. I know you're a cosplayer. Should we work with that?" Haley chortled deep in his chest. "So you're creeping her? Huh? Her fans say danger? Do you stand? I'm gonna tell her girlfriend." I sighed and looked in the mirror to see how much of an apology I owed her for outing her hobby. O'Leary met my gaze in the mirror and her eyes sparkled. "Oh, he's done more than creep me, Cahaley. The young buck practically threw himself at my feet when we met. Cheryl was there for it. She wasn't mad about it." Her eyebrows waggled lecherously in emphasis. Cahaley slapped me on the shoulder, grinning. "Danger, you motherfucker. I knew you were lucky. Well, I didn't know you were that lucky." O'Leary made a snorting sound. "He really is. If I'd known I was going to have to see this much of his face every day for the last 6 months, I'd have never let her convince me to take him home." I nudged the back of her seat. "You know nothing compares to you, Sinead." She nodded. Yeah, keep it in your pants, lover boy. You have to focus on the road, not your ego." Sanchez made gagging sounds from the front passenger seat. His large Adam's apple bobbed up and down, emphasizing the sound. Keep it straight there, you two. "I get that you're all bi and poly and ethical and whatnot, but not everyone is as understanding as us two corporals." Haley grunted and replied in a cartoonish simple voice, "News to me, wink wink, but then I'm just the muscle." He actually said the winks out loud and then flexed, straining the sleeve of his top. Sanchez blew a mustache-rattling raspberry at Haley's tired old joke and went back to watching his section of the road while commenting, "I didn't know about the cosplay thing, though." Haley whistled under his breath and muttered, "Never bet against danger. Ridiculously lucky." He resumed scanning the horizon to the left and right. His back moved as he scanned, his thick neck and heavily muscled shoulders pivoting as a single unit. The sun beat straight down on top of him. Beads of sweat trickled down the side of his face, cutting tracks into the road dust. We were in a central in a little convoy traveling over packed sand and gravel to a designated safe zone, and technically off duty, but we rolled out armed, ready, and cautious despite the lighthearted banter. I leaned forward off my pack to adjust it. I'd secured it to stick slightly forward on my seat to the left to provide a bit of a headrest. It's slightly bigger than my torso and heavy with medical supplies in addition to standard gear. My good luck charm was poking out of an extra tack pouch I'd added to the top, his little pointed cap slightly bent. I responded to O'Leary, pretending the other two hadn't added their 2 cents. "Tempting as I am, please do keep your hands on the wheel and your eyes on the road. If I'm going to die out here in the dust, I want it to be quiet and peaceful in my sleep, just like my dad, not like his passengers." O'Leary snorted from behind the wheel. She somehow made it cute. "And that's why we don't let you drive." I took a moment to admire her and let my face get soft in memories. Her red-orange hair had been shaved down to her scalp, and the stubble shone like glitter in the sun. While standing, the top of her head was just below my eye line, and I could slide my arm across her shoulders and snuggle her in comfortably. It made me feel tall, even at 5'10". I sighed again more dramatically and pitched my voice into the most annoying childlike whine I could. "Are we there yet?" Haley called out over the road, "Sandstorm brewing up. I can see a wall on R9 and there's some big dust devils forming up in front of it." Weird. O'Leary looked in the mirror at me and spoke up over the road. Noise. Isabelta is going to drop when that wall hits, and we've got another couple of miles of this bumpy shit to roll through. Is Norman going to be okay? She drew out the vowels of his name in a mockingly long sing-song. I got a lot of shit over my little good luck charm, but we were allowed comfort items, and Norman was the only one that I had. I straightened out his hat and turned him in the pouch to face front. Dusty but fine, just like always. We should let him drive. He's never been in an accident as the driver, and you two are practically the same height. Haley cut in and nudged me with his foot again. Stop playing with your dolly. How's the package? For the last time, Haley, he's not a dolly. He's an action figure. Why, he's out here in the shit with us. Norman had alternately been called a dolly, a plushie, fantasy fetish stroker, and although I wouldn't admit it out loud, my personal favorite, a beard Barbie. He was boxed up during the long weeks of basic training when I joined up, and afterwards, when we were allowed civilian items, I'd hidden him in my favorite boots. But there's really no expectation of privacy, and he'd been found. I'd taken the teasing as gracefully as possible and given as good as I got most days. A couple of guys tried to mess with me by stealing or trying to destroy Norman. It never went well for them. I had nothing to do with it, and I had alibis that stood up. But it became common knowledge around the barracks that bad luck came to anyone that fucked with Norman, or me. Laces broke, straps slipped, seams tore, stains stuck. Those might seem like minor things, but you try rucking 10K with one loose boot, or shoring up to formation with a stain on the crotch of your dress uniform and see how much fun you have. Friends and squad mates that weren't shitbags also seemed to get choice assignments whenever luck of the draw was involved. Soldiers are a superstitious lot, and Norman is kind of awesome, so he quickly became a mascot wherever I went. The fact of the matter was that he was 6 inches, opposable, damn near indestructible, hard plastic, and probably lead-based paint. I had him as long as I could remember, and he still looked pretty good. He had a pointy red hat pulled down to eyebrow level, sunglasses that sat over a bulbous nose, and a beard that stretched halfway down the beige overcoat that covered the rest of him down to his little black boots. Most of his clothes were removable, but I respected his privacy. Mostly I just kept him around as someone to talk to when things were rough, and things were rough a lot when I was growing up. When my dad died and took my mom with him, I bounced from a fucked up family to foster care to a senile crone of a grandmother. Nothing was reliable except for Norman. He was always there for me. Fine, stop playing with your action figure then. How's the package? I looked over the large cooler strapped in next to me and lifted the lid a crack. A big smile crept over my face at the sight of the Goodwill gift that we were going to share with some locals. 3 dozen cans of beer nestled securely in ice. The mountains are blue. I repeat, the mountains are blue. I was so looking forward to a little R&R and hoped the delivery, one of many, would help us make some local connections. But what are they cooking again, Sanchez? There's a whole goat getting roasted, little buddy. Sanchez shouted from the shotgun seat without looking back. He called almost everybody little buddy, except Haley. The lanky Latino signalman slouched in at a good 6'6" and sported a Texas drawl and a mustache as large as Regs would allow. He'd shown us pictures of it pre-service where it was twice as large and apparently an award winner. I could hear the eagerness in his voice and started salivating at the thought of the delicious spiced meat roasting on an open fire. I heard an appreciative whistle from behind me and was nodding in agreement when the car in front of us exploded. My mind recalibrated as I watched it flip over back to front, and I realized the whistles were in no way, shape, or form a sign of appreciation. Another whistle sounded and something zipped through the roll cage in front of my seat. Sand and rock blew up to my left. Our dagger slewed to a halt under O'Leary's expert hands, and Sancho's radioed for help. Shit, I grunted as everyone rolled out of our ride, taking what little cover they could. My seatbelt stuck. I slammed the release again, and nothing fuck me, I swore again, as the flames in the lead car jumped and another whine of a rocket-propelled grenade preceded an explosion from behind us. Debris and shrapnel blew past my side of the dagger, but I was sheltered by my pack in the seat. I cut myself loose from the medic shears and darted past the burning metal, looking for somewhere safe to return fire. The roar of heavy weapons kicked in as the rest of the squad engaged the hostiles. Haley would be laying down a steady stream of suppressive shots from our position in the middle, while O'Leary, our designated marksman, picked off targets. I felt the surge of adrenaline pushing me towards panic and spiked despair that had already lost people. But I pushed those feelings aside and did my job as line medic. One problem at a time. Feelings later, work now. I muttered to myself. I was almost at the lead car when I saw Sanchez's skinny ass backing out from the rear driver's side of that overturned wreckage. He must have sprinted there while I was stuck. He was hauling out our squad leader, Staff Sergeant Sue. I could easily make out Sue's stern profile, even with the lowered visibility. His face was scorched and bloody. I squinted into the blowing sand and blistering sun at the passenger side of the burning Dagor. A movement in the sand dunes drew my attention, and I spotted a dusty figure hefting an RPG launcher to his shoulder. It was aimed at Sanchez and the Dagor I was hustling towards. Down, 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 I screamed, and dropped to one knee and started firing at the man with the launcher. Everything slowed down, and I was treated to an excruciating slow, frame-by-frame moment. My first shot took him in the leg. The second shot took him just below the belt. He folded around it, dropping the empty launcher. I was too late. The rocket-propelled grenade flew right at my Dagor, where O'Leary and Cahaley sheltered. O'Leary was looking at me. Cahaley was firing at another group. He didn't see it. The world went red and black. Something heavy slammed into my pack and pushed me deep into the sand, knocking the wind out of me. I couldn't get a breath in and started seeing bright dots on the insides of my eyelids, then gray, then black. I'm jumping forward a few chapters for some lighter material. The smoke coalesced into the upper body of a male, an unsettlingly muscular man, with the head and drooping ears of a shagged donkey. A brown turban wound round the long, misshapen head, both under and over the ears. It ended up looking nothing so much as a particularly iconic emoji, considering the sound that had preceded his arrival. A gaudy vest that matched the enamel of the hookah stretched over his bowling ball shoulders and lay open over a bare chest. Coarse, mousy blonde hairs sprouted down the middle of his abdomen in a treasure trail that led to a broad, embossed, and bejeweled belt. Below the belt was nothing but purple smoke, tapering down to anchor to the top of the hookah. The genie didn't look down at me, but posed with arms wide, and to my gem-educated eye, flexed slightly to pop out his lats. It suddenly made sense. Life is shit, and my own brain is making fun of me. This is a hallucination. It's a giant joke. Could have been a white rabbit or Robin Williams, but no, it's a donkey-headed bodybuilder. Cool. Yeah, let's get weird. A cultured but somewhat pompous and toothy braying voice issued from oversized lips as the donkey-faced genie announced, "Greetings, O thrice blind mortal. Know that even though you cannot perceive me, I, the genie of the pipe, am here to grant your request. Speak it in my presence, and though it be great or small, it should be granted. You have..." "Hi," I interrupted, trying to keep myself from snickering. He looked down at me in shock, dropping his arms from the pose and cocking his head to one side. You're new?" His voice garbled as his huge lips stuck together with a zipping sound. He sighed heavily, inhaled, and started over, bulging arms crossing over a barrel chest. His lips made an unzipping sound as he began, "Greetings, O thrice blind mortal. Know that even though you cannot perceive me, I, the genie of the pipe, am here to grant your request. Speak in my presence, and though it be great or small, it shall be granted. You have summoned me and are therefore eligible for up to 3 requests." I stared blankly at him, waiting for something else. Maybe little cartoon birds start flying around my head. The silence stretched, and suddenly my social reflexes kicked in, and the scroll running the machinery in my brain cranked out words before I had fully thought through the situation. "What should I call you?" He pulled his head back in shock and snapped his fingers. The steady tick-tock of the clock on top of the mini-fridge stopped, and the sound of the newsreel from the other room vanished. "That," he enunciated, "is the first time anyone has ever asked me that particular question. You may call me Taylor or Genie. My pronouns are he and him. Request granted. You're eligible for 2 more requests."
So much, John. So I'm just going to take this opportunity to update you guys on a little bit of what Spud Publishing is planning and just how you can find us and follow what else we're planning on doing. So we're spending the rest of this year marketing these wonderful people behind me, as well as the rest of the people involved in debut. And then we are actually going to be opening submissions. That's the word I'm looking for. We'll be opening submissions this fall to do a second anthology. Now we're opening these to artists and authors, so if there's anyone aspiring, wants to give it a shot, by all means, I invite you to follow us on social media check out our website, spudpub.com. If you're looking for our social media, we've got everything on the lovely banner back there. I do have cards, but I thought about bringing everyone else's and kind of forgot to restock ours. And on top of that, we actually just started a Discord that we're also going to be keeping everyone up to date on what we're doing, the different events we're attending, as well as the future anthology and things that we're working on. If anybody wants to join that, by all means, we don't have those on our cards and our banner yet. Let me know and I can give you the information. Now, without further ado, I believe we're opening to questions if you guys have any. So I'm just going to take a moment to kind of shuffle this aside so we can get you to see all these lovely people behind me. Yeah. Don't be shy. How probably
That works.
Yeah. Thank you.
Okay, start with that. I talk last.
All right, now that we've got situated, yeah, we would love to answer any questions that you guys have, either about the stories, about the art, about the company, anything your little hearts desire. That's what we're here for. Oh, there's two there, so I'll start with, yes.
Could I just, like, I know one person, could I maybe have a little bit of background about some of the artists? Like who they are, where they're from, what their inspiration is, just a little bit of background.
Yeah, absolutely. So the question was asked for a bit of background on some of our artists. So I'm actually just gonna let Romy take the floor first. She is the one that's here. So Romy, tell us a little bit about yourself.
When I said artists, also the authors, not just the artists.
Oh, okay, for sure.
Yeah. I thought we'd go left, right? But I guess it's me first.
Oh, we'll do a quick introduction of everybody.
Yeah, so I'm Romy Poisson. For me, art, it has always been more of a hobby, but it's been something that's been very consistent in what I do. And when I started, it was always just, pencil, paper, traditional. I'd go to high school sports, and if I had a chance, I'd buy a new sketchbook when I needed it, that sort of thing. And then it just progressed that eventually pencil and paper weren't cutting it, and everything was branching into digital, and I thought it was a good chance to and it was a good chance for me to start learning how to do that. So for the most part, when it came to even the pencil and paper and the digital art, I'm fully self-taught. Everything I've done is just me winging it and figuring out what works. And then, and then when opportunities like debut came up, it was like, you know what, this is a good chance to try and see what I can do not on a, I don't know if you want to call it a bigger scale, but just something to
say professional.
Professional scale. Professional scale.
We've made tens of dollars.
Just as a chance to branch out and see if it's something that I enjoy doing and want to keep doing, which so far it has been. Go this way, I don't know.
Yeah,
Sit down.
And I lost my book. I'm Clancy.
sure. Thank you.
I'm Rachel Sikorsky. I write pretty predominantly like fantasy, like very Tolkien inspired. I am actually also like very inspired by Tolkien and inspired by Tolkien inspired works. There's like a whole ladder. You don't want to get me started about it. This is also what I research academically is like Tolkien inspired things. So it's all Tolkien all the time. But like specifically for this story, it was actually inspired by a very particular song by I believe they are Swedish band called Takida. The song is called Fail, and I'd heard it like multiple times prior, but when I was thinking about what kind of story I wanted to write for this anthology, I was driving and I heard this song come on my Spotify playlist, and I was like, oh, this is perfect, and it fit really nicely, and then the story kind of grew from there. Yeah.
I actually have one. Somebody handed this to me. My name is Amy Garayan. I wrote and illustrated in this book, and art and writing has been something I've kind of done as a hobby side thing, I guess, for forever. I got really into printmaking in university, so yeah, right, like it's awesome. As for this particular story, what inspired me was, well, one of my sisters, and she's in the back somewhere there. I hope her face is really red right now. You just bypassed yourself.
Welcome back to her. She's the boss. She gets to speak last. Hi, I'm John Gatens. I have been a storyteller for ever, according to the report cards that my mom kept. So I used to get in trouble for it. Now I've made tens of dollars for professionally writing. I have a degree in education, a couple other random piles of things. I have ADHD, which means I do a bunch of things, and then they all go into my brain, into a blender, and then new stuff comes out my face or hands. And in this particular case, the entire story was based off of a meme that I saw one time of what if you had wishes for a genie and your first wish was that the genie forgot how numbers worked. And because like I've been playing D&D since 1984, okay? I have dealt with players trying to find workarounds for wishes since I was small, and I'm like, I'm writing a story about this now. And then a whole bunch, as many of you noticed, there's a bunch of really bad old jokes woven into the story there. And like I said, I just absorb all kinds of content and media, and it goes into the blender in the back of my head, and then hopefully new content comes out. But really, once you've looked at a dictionary, it's just all a remix.
Hi, I'm Chenise Puchailo. I am one of the writers as well as one half of the ownership of the Spud Publishing team. Before I introduce myself, I just wanted a chance to talk about the people who were not able to join us. So we have Irish Williams, who also did double duty as a writer and artist. She is also our cover artist and does majority of our promotional art. She is wonderful. We love her. She is a background artist that works in Vancouver. She has worked on such shows as, what was she in, the Snoopy show? She's done work on Rick and Morty. She recently had a contract on Lower Decks, so she is quite fairly accomplished. And I'm not like forgetting who is in the book. I'm just wanting to make sure I don't miss anybody. We also have my business partner, Jenny Kong, who is unable to join us because she's also in Vancouver. She is one of the artists in the book. She actually illustrated for Rachel's story. She is a 3D animator. She has worked on such projects, too many to count. Mortal Kombat, Angry Birds, Mortal Kombat, and a whole, yeah, Into the Spider-Verse, and a whole list of things that I cannot remember.
It's lengthy.
There is also Sean Kahn, who is the artist for Dawn's story. Also in animation, he is a storyboard artist, and I think his most recent projects were Scavenger's Reign, and then he did work on He-Man Revelations, I believe. So yeah, these are all Jenny's connections. They're not mine. So I'm really happy she's on the ownership team.
I also want to say Sean was the lead artist, and with his experience, he was someone that the rest of us could go to and ask questions about, or like I would go to him and be like, all right, tear my picture apart and tell me what I have to do. When he said I had some good things, I was like, okay, that feels great. Awesome. But having him was a lot of like excellent help to have.
And then our editor was Diane Vicara. She is from New York. She's also a long-term friend of mine and Jenny's. She is good with the words, and so it just kind of seemed like a no-brainer for us. And then myself, again, I am Chenise Puchailo. I have a background in journalism. I'm very passionate about print, which I guess is why I can't stop at writing. I did not read from my story purely for time constraints, but my story is modern fantasy. I also write kind of like high fantasy, that kind of route. All of my stories are based on things I wrote when I was in single digits for age, and then just kind of kept maturing and going with me. So in a strict technicality, all of my stories have been at least like a decade or two in development. That doesn't mean they're good. That just means they've been around for a really long time. So that is the group that put Debut together. Now I believe there was a question right here in front as well.
Yeah, it's already been partially answered. So I was actually going to ask about the influences as well. And in particular, if there's one fantasy or speculative fiction author that could be being a particularly big influence on the story in the book. Yeah, maybe that's a question.
So in chapter 2, I specifically call out Ender's Game because the author, like, it's so good stuff, but I've been largely inspired by Terry Pratchett, specifically because he's always used his material as satire to punch in the right direction. And I always wanted to be able to tackle serious topics with a funny voice because people remember jokes. That was what got me.
I guess I'll go next for this one. My huge inspirations are probably Robin Hobb and Carol Berg. Granted, they're more writers that I've read in my adult years, but like highly recommend. They're the style that I absolutely strive to emulate. They write a lot of very like serious content, but in ways that are very delicate, in at least that I have found. Do not recommend them if you don't want heavy reads, but like absolutely my top two.
Can I pass on this question?
And Rachel, would you
You've
like
already
to
been
go?
paid. Yeah, well.
So I kind of mentioned Tolkien already, but he's like he's for me, like his work is very inspirational. But the authors that actually like inspired me to write my own stories were largely Tamara Pierce and Rachel Aaron. Tamara Pierce, I grew up reading, and it was the first exposure I had to like young women in fantasy that were actually learning to sword fight and learning, offensive magic and like just doing things instead of being very passive. And that really stuck with me. And then growing up a little bit more and then reading Rachel Aaron's work, specifically The Legend of Eli Mompress. And for whatever reason, that book in particular just lives in my brain rent free at all times. And I was like, I want to be like Rachel Aaron. I want to write books about these like morally ambiguous, kind of awful people going on adventures.
So, can I not pass? Tamora Pierce, yes, except I didn't grow up, I still just reread them.
Just a little bit on the art side, for inspiration, at least for the pieces I did in the debut, Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark. That was, I went in without an idea of an actual inspiration, and then Sean in his guidance suggested I look for something and guided me towards that one, and I looked him up and I was like, that's what we're doing. Yeah. So even the stories, inspired the art. And the story, Irish's story, which I did the art for.
Oh, thank you.
Her very first line is, "There's a Kelpie in a koi pond," in the koi pond. And that never left me, and that became a huge inspiration for at least one of the pieces.
All right, any other questions that curious minds are burning to know the answers to?
Excellent. Our amazing words have stunned you all. So great. Uh-oh.
You asked for this.
No.
Were you intentionally channeling Kronk, or what's that?
Yeah, for real, I had the same question. I even mentioned it to her.
So amongst the many things that I've done, acting is one of them, and voice acting as well. And yes, it was like a little. I was tossed up between Kronk and Peter Warburton, who played the Tick. Yeah, that big back of the head voice that just bellows things out. So yeah, I needed something for a big muscle boot.
Now, whenever I picture that character, that's all.
Yeah, just a big muscle boot. Yeah.
I see a question at the back.
if you had to, for each of you, pick one word, any word for your main character, what would you choose off the top of your head?
All right, so the question was asked if we had to pick one word to describe our main characters, what would that be?
I actually have an answer.
Oh, chaotic.
Broken.
Can I also make that my answer?
We're not talking about ourselves, Chenise. We're friends.
I'm so happy that's on live stream for like all of you people and so many other people to enjoy.
I will.
Rachel?
I couldn't think of one. Romy thought of a good one that is very accurate, and I would like to submit it as my answer, which is aggrieved. Thank you.
Romy, as a bonus round, would you like to just describe your drawings with one word? Spoopy, yeah.
Real word.
Spooky, creepy.
Along those lines.
All right, I don't see any other hands going.
We get the drawings in one word for Amy.
Oh, yeah, good call.
Sorry.
I would like to submit artistic.
Okay.
Would you like to describe your drawings?
No.
Chenise, I just had an idea. If you buy the book, you can see the drawings.
Or you can just look at them on the shelf.
I'm technically correct.
I don't think for Amy's drawings, I almost wanna say like, astrological, like they have a tone to them that I really like for that.
Can you tell us the artist you based yours on?
No, because I don't remember their name.
Oh,
That's fair.
So yeah, I believe there's no more questions. We will hand this back to our coordinator here to see us out, and then books are available for purchase. Like I said, if you want to follow our journey, check us out on Spud Pub, follow any of our social medias, hit me up to get on our Discord, anything you want if you decide to follow us. And yeah, I'll invite Jasper back up to see us off.
Hey, thank you so much, everyone, for coming out tonight. Thank you for all of our authors and illustrators. I'm not sure where to stand, so I'm not blocking anyone. Kind of over here. Yeah, if you would like to get copies of Debut signed, there are some up here on the table. There are also some on the desk back where you came in. And you're welcome to get your copy signed before purchasing it. Just remember to stop by the cash desk on your way out, please. Thank you. Yeah, thank you so much for coming in. I hope you all have a good evening.
And thanks McNally for hosting us.
Hey. Clear the aisles.